Good morning, Nachum. Good to have Shabbos, everybody. Tomorrow we have the privilege of reading Parshas Chayei Sarah. Whoa. First of all, just the very name of the Parsha, the life or lives of Sarah, is the Parsha which talks about her passing. As the first pasuk tells us, she lives 127 years and then dies and then is buried. Why is the parsha called Chayei Sarah? And interestingly, so too, the last parsha in Bereshis, called Vayechi Yaakov, and Yaakov lived, is the parsha that at the end of Vayechi talks extensively about his passing. What is the Torah teaching us? That in Judaism, death is simply a part of life. It continues life. The neshama, the soul, lives on. This is a very, very important teaching of the very name of the parsha itself. The parsha of Chayei Sarah contains 105 psukim. Interestingly, the parsha can be split into 3 parts. The first 20 psukim speak of Avram's acquiring a burial place for Sarah. Some even count this acquisition as the 10th test, of which we are taught in the 5th chapter of Avos, that everybody agrees to the number 10. Abraham faced 10 tests in his life and passed them all. Interesting debate among the authorities, what were the 10? So, for example, most authorities would say that the 10th test was at the end of Parshas Vayera, namely, Abraham was faced with the test of the Akedah. There are those, however, that learn that the burial of Sarah was the 10th test. How might it compare? And one answer is certainly, as Rashi explains in the beginning of Parshas Vayera, after Moshe questions at the end of Shmos, like what's going on, says Moshe to Hashem. Things have only gotten worse now that I've come to Paro. And Hashem rebukes Moshe in the beginning of Parshas Vayera, and Rashi explains, Vayera ela avos, I appeared to the avos, and even though I did not fulfill my promise to them, they never complained. But you, Moshe, are complaining to me about what I am doing. Whoa. And what is it that Rashi says over there? Hashem told Avraham, this land is your land. And yet, when it came time to bury Sarah, he has to purchase the land, as the text teaches, over la socher, for an exorbitant amount of money. And we don't find that Avraham, after the deal, looks heavenward and says, Hashem, like, what's going on here? You don't keep your word. Okay. Be it as it may, the first 20 psukim of Parshas Chayei Sarah teach us the important principle of Kever Yisrael. Literally, that a Jew is to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, meaning that we don't have the outlook and philosophical idea, come on, once you're dead, what's the difference where you're buried? After all, this is earth and that is earth. Why can't Abraham bury Sarah in the cemetery of Ches? Why can't a Jew be buried in a non-Jewish cemetery? Why must a Jew be buried as opposed to, God forbid, cremated? Why must a Jew be buried in the ground as opposed to above ground burial? And the answer to this is that a Jew lives differently, dies differently. We believe that only the body is laid to rest in the ground, but the neshama, the soul, lives on, which helps us get through the phenomena of death with greater understanding, because we recognize that it's not an end all, but rather it's a transition from this world to another world. And we believe that the dead of Israel will be privileged to have Tchias HaMesim, which is the 13th principle of faith of the Rambam, that there will be a resurrection of the dead. That's the first 20 psukim. The next 67 psukim constitute the longest chapter in the book of Bereshis, and incredibly, the Torah tells us of the negotiation, the test that the servant of Avraham, who was designated to find a bride for Yitzchak, and instead of asking me what I thought the test should have been, like to ask the young lady about to go to the well, very simply, where is God? And if she would say, God? What kind of a God? No such thing as God. She's not the girl. If she points up to the sky, she's in the running. No, the criteria was not in where is God. The criteria was, is she a good person? The Ran, in his Drushos Horan, explains that there are midos and deos. Midos are characteristics. What's her character like? Is she giving or taking? That is passed on. Good or bad personality is passed on in our genes from one generation to the next, as opposed to deos, which is beliefs, that can be undone. A good person, such as Rivka, even though she was raised in a home of idolatry, could be taught the concepts of monotheism. The Torah is teaching us the first thing to look for in a wife is she a giver? Is she a taker? Will she have guests for Shabbos, even though it might not be the best for her nails? Or, come on, she has the right and proper values. So this is the second part of the parsha. And the third part of the parsha is the burial of Avraham by Yitzchak and Yishmael, and Avraham marrying Keturah and the progeny of Yishmael. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, says something especially fascinating. There are 3 parshios in the Torah that talk about Avraham: Lech Lecha, Vayera, and Chayei Sarah. And the Rebbe reminds us, as found in the Gemara Avodah Zarah, Tes Amud Aleph 9a, and the Ramban in Bereshis, chapter 2, Pasuk 3, Asher bara Elokim la'asos, which we recite every Friday night as the introduction to the Kiddush. The Gemara, in the name of Tana Debei Eliyahu, the Ramban teaches that this world, and I quote from the Gemara, Sheishes alofim shana haveya olam. This world consists of 6,000 years. The first 2,000 years are tohu, literally nothingness. The second 2,000 years are Torah, and the last 2,000 years are Yemos HaMoshiach. Says the Rebbe, Puk Chazi, take a look. There are 3 parshios that talk about Avraham Avinu. Parshas Lech Lecha is the tohu of Avraham's life, the nothingness. He has to leave where his birthplace is, his community, his father's home. All that negativity, all that nothingness, don't take that with you. All right? And this is the beginning of Lech Lecha. And how does Lech Lecha end? With chapter 17 in the book of Bereshis, the chapter of Bris Milah. And Milah, as we know, is the prerequisite for enabling the Jew to study Torah. So the first 2,000 years of civilization were Tohu. The first part of Avram's life was Tohu. The second part of civilization, second 2,000 years, is starting with Hanefesh Asher Asu B'Charan, Avraham teaching monotheism to the world, and it's encapsulated the next 2,000 years in Vayera, where the Torah teaches what's the greatness of Avraham. Why does God love Avraham? Ki yadativ, I love him, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lemana sheyitzava es bonav v'es beso acharav, because he will direct, command his children, progeny after him, lasos tzedakah u'mishpat, to perpetuate tzedakah, literally kindness and judgment. And finally, the last 2,000 years are Yemos HaMoshiach. Now take note, everybody, how does Chayei Sarah end? Parshas Chayei Sarah, chapter 25, interestingly, begins with number 1, Avraham remarrying. Okay? Avraham continued, he takes a wife, her name is Keturah. Sounds like Keturah to me, says Rashi. And who is this Keturah? None less than Hagar. Hagar, she was the one who, at the end of Vayera, says to Avraham, Goresh, Homo Hazos V'es Benah. Get rid of this woman and her son. And God agrees with Sarah. Shma b'kolah. Listen, is it not somewhat of a shtoch to Sarah that Abraham remarries the very woman she said get rid of? What's going on here? It's clear, Rashi points out, that Keturah, from Ketores, like the incense, that Ma'aseho Ketores. Hagar clearly did tshuva, a reversal of her ways, and therefore, as will be in the future, as we say, Achris Hayomim, we complete every prayer session. V'nemar, Oya Hashem lemelech al kol ha'oretz, bayom hahu, yeh Hashem echad, u'shmo echad. How does the parsha end? The very maftir, the last few psukim of Chayei Sarah, conclude with Eile Toldos Yishmael. Eilehem b'nei Yishmael. These are the descendants of Yishmael. And the parsha ends with the 5 words, Al Pnei Kol Echav Nafal. Literally, on the face of all his brethren, Yishmael Nafal, falls. And we see that happening in our day, that the progeny of Yishmael is exceedingly numerous. And just take a look, my friends, at the last Balaturim on the parsha. Now, what's the next verse after Al Pnei Kol Echav Nafal? The next verse is V'Eile Toldos Yitzchak. These are, next week, the generations that came from Yitzchak. Lomar, says the Balaturim, Kishayipel Yishmael, when Yishmael will fall in Achris Hayomim, the end of days, Oz, then Yitzmach ben David will sprout forth the Moshiach Shehu Mitoldos Yitzchak. The juxtaposition of the fall of Yishmael and Eile Toldos Yitzchak is a beautiful remez, a beautiful hint towards Tchiyas HaMesim. What's the message of all this? Number 1, Echad Haya Avram. Take a look at the pasuk in Yechezkel, chapter 33, pasuk 24. Singular was Avram. The life of Avraham encapsulates past, present, and future. When we say the bracha to Hashem Mogein Avraham, we know what that means. Past, present, future. We're living in very special times. And remember, the Rashi at the beginning of Lech Lecha, when God says to Avraham, I'll make you into a great nation, that's the God of Abraham. I'll bless you, that's the God of Yitzchak. And I'll make your name great, that's the God of Yaakov. I might think, says the Gemara in Psachim 117b, that maybe we will close the bracha, Baruch to Hashem, Mogein, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. No, we end the bracha Mogein Avraham. Why? Because B'cha Chosmin, Jewish history, closes, it begins with Avraham, and it ends with Avraham. And the rabbis interpret this to mean, as the Tiferet Shlomo points out, what does it mean? B'cha Chosmin, as Avraham was known for his chesed, so too Am Yisrael. Keep up. Besides, and of course, your learning of Torah, keep up your chesed, and Emeritus Hashem, he is, I promise you, on his way. Shabbat Shalom to all.